leaching CPAs from the plastic, especially the ones that are heating up? Is there an issue around using plastic?
There's got to be some kind of organism populations in that bin leaching of the plastic. No one's ever really done a trial to demonstrate it. So yeah, could we pick a plastic bin that is not going to leach? Or wood white might be a whole lot better. There's some newer wood designs of these things, so you just use 2x4s or something like that to make the bins. And then holes in the bottom of the bin, of course, to let water move through. And certainly when you have wood, and there's the airflow coming in between each of the bits of wood going in. So with the worm bin, just to go through that process, you would buy bedding material with whatever worms you want to buy. And typically for a worm bin like this, you're going to be getting the red wigglers. Eosinea fetida. I can never spell Eosinea. Close. And then feta. So fetida really means that it's manure worms, but these worms deal with any organic matter. They only live in pure organic matter to speak of. And so red wigglers or litter worms, I was laughing at people, they're done using their bins, so they put their worms into their garden soil. How long did your worms stay there? 10 seconds? They left. Hopefully they had enough time to escape and go looking, but if there's no place close enough with good litter layer, then they will die. Earthworms can only tolerate direct sunlight for 15 seconds. And so if they're out in this direct sunlight, now if it's a cloudy day, they got a little bit longer, but direct hot sunlight, like it's out there right now, they're goners in about 15 seconds.
What about raw food versus cooked food when eating your income?
Doesn't matter. What really matters is what's the biology going on. Your cooked food, how much of that biology did you destroy? And is there any way to get that cooked food covered with some really good organisms? And typically your worms won't touch it until there is a decent amount of biology on the surface. So when you put your cooked food on the surface of your bin, as long as there's contact with the existing worm compost, you're getting inoculated pretty rapidly, and now your worms come along and they're going, good bacteria. It tastes a little bit different from that raw stuff, but which one do they like better? I don't know. So you buy the worms and you spread them out. Been having some extensive discussions about how many worms should be in a pound of bedding material. And it should be that 1 pound of worms should equal about 2,000 individual worms. You talk to Clive Edwards and he'll say it's possible for 1 pound of bedding material to contain 6,000 worms, but I have never seen that happen. So I think almost all the time people would agree that it's about 2,000 worms in a pound. And so figure that if you're buying a pound of worms, you're going to be putting about 2,000 into the bottom. Probably not adequate for a bin that size. You probably want to buy at least about 5 pounds. So what size bin are you putting it in? The larger it is, the more worms you're going to have to buy. So why not start out with a worm bin this size and grow your own? So in 6 months or a year, you could do one of the large bins from your own worms. So you lay the worms in there. The bedding material is typically peat moss, getting way too expensive though now for peat moss, so hemlock, shredded bark of some kind is typically what they're coming in. The shredded bark has a lot of microorganisms in it, especially fungi. So you're coming with a pretty good inoculum of all those critters. So now you start putting down your layer of food waste or mix of green, woody plant materials, manure, whatever you've got, and only put in, say maybe a 1/4 inch of material. You don't want it a smooth layer. Do not take your food material, put it in a wearing blender and turn it into slurry. Because if you put a slurry on top of your worm bin, you will kill your worms. Oxygen does not move through water very well at all. How do I know this? Mary Applehoff and I were doing this experiment where we had about 20 worm bins. And the only way we could figure out that we would get exactly the same amount of each of the foods in the food mixtures was to wear and blend it and put that slurry on top of the worm bins. So 20 worm bins, we've got 20 times 50,000 worms or something like that. So lots and lots of worms, and we're very carefully weighing out exactly the right amount of material and slopping it on the surface. Got done late in the evening, so we happily closed up the business, walked out the front door, come back the next morning, and we're going, what's that smell? And walked into the house, opened the basement door, and there was this herd of worms coming at us. So I went, oh my God, what happened? Because all the worms go anaerobic, worms are all leaving. They are down the side, across the floor, halfway up the wall. We spent the rest of the day picking worms off and restarting our experiment. Do not wear any blend. Put it on as chunks. They like chunks. Break it up pretty small because they like it real small material. More surface area for the bacteria to grow on, and they will take care of chewing up the rest of that material for you.
I think that's what's causing that anaerobic condition in my friend's worm bin because they juice every morning and it takes some juice.
Yeah, squish out the excess juice and just put the pulp, fairly dry pulp on the surface.
Mix it with shredded paper.
You could mix it with something that would suck up the excess moisture. Absolutely, it's the shredded paper, cardboard, sawdust, something like that. So wait, how many days, how many hours does it take for the worms to incorporate that and give you a nice smooth surface again? If they use this up within less than 3 days, then you could up the amount of material that you put on. So let's say they use this up on the first day. Then I'd suggest to you the next day that you would put on 1/2 inch of material and see how long it took them to incorporate that. If they don't use it up in 3 days, please remove the material that's left because the fruit flies have laid their eggs in there and those fruit flies are about to hatch. Do something else on that stuff because you really don't want those fruit flies to be joining you in your house. And then 1/2 inch until you see that the worms are using up in less than 3 days. So now they're using up that 1/2 inch in 1 day, so now we start putting on 3/4 of an inch. They use up the 3/4 of an inch in a day, so now you put on 1 inch. And you can just keep increasing the amount of food, because of course as these worms chew on that material, they're going to decide this is a great place to have a family. And so they're going to lay their eggs a little bit lower down, and those eggs hatch, and now you got more worms. And more worms, so you're going to have to feed the family more as time goes on. The hotter it gets, the slower the worms are going to work. Up to about 95 degrees, worms are going to be chewing away faster and faster and faster. But when you get about 95 degrees in the bin, then they all kind of feel like they got to go over here to the hammock, take a nap, because it's just too hot to do anything. And you'll notice that they stop using up your food quite as fast, and now you have to back off on the amount of food. So again, be a little careful. If you can keep your worm bin in the shade, if you can keep the worm bin in a cool area of your house, maybe down in a cellar somewhere, maybe in the middle of the summer it's time to bring them into the air conditioning. But if you want them to keep chewing on your food really fast, you're going to have to make sure that they don't get too hot because they stop working when it gets too hot. You need to keep the bin at about 70% moisture. So put your hand in there, pick it up, and make sure that just as you start squeezing, you're going to be getting a drop or two out of that worm bin material. They like it wetter. more likely to go anaerobic really easily too than a thermal compost pile. So you keep putting the food on there, you keep putting the food on, and now you're getting really close to the top of your worm bin. In a batch culture like this, what you're going to do is instead of layering your food all the way across, just start putting your food on half of the bin. So you're only putting the food out to here. And that encourages all of these worms to come on over, and you concentrate your worms this side of the bin. It usually takes 1 or 2 feedings for them to figure out that food's over here and there's not going to be food over there. So come on over, boys. We're having a party over here. And then you just take a shovel, you take a trowel, you take something, and you dig this material out. Put it into a plastic bin, let it dry down a little bit, and then use it wherever it is you need to use it. Keep it about 30 to 50% in order to store compost, keeping the organisms alive and happy and cooking. So now you've removed this side of the bin, and you're going to spread this material out. What you'll notice is when you take the material out of this half of the bin, it's finished, there's still going to be a few worms in there. There's always like these worms that don't get the information. Did not get the memo. They refuse to pay attention. And so, you know, pick them out or just leave them in there. And wherever you sell that compost to, it's going to get a few worms.
I heard if you let them sit in in a cardboard or something that has a lot of airflow, that those eggs will actually hatch, and then you can do whatever with those young worms. You turn into the bin or add into your soil. So you're inoculating your soil, at least the top part of your soil, right, with the worms.
Yeah, you can be putting these, if you use this worm cast material, you probably could be putting some eggs out into the real world. Well, you have a litter layer on top of where it was you put your worm cast. Yes, then they'll survive. No, they're leaving and going someplace.
Yeah. So as long as you're putting some organic matter down on top of that.
You need organic material on the surface, so put a litter layer down.
I'm not sure if it's that exact kind of garbage anymore, but if you go out and get a rotted trunk of a banana tree and pull it apart, it'll have a lot of red worms. That's what I used to start my bin, and there are lots of red wingers in there. I'm not sure whether it's yosemite, but it works.
Yep. And that might work just fine for yourself, for your own worm bin, but don't try to sell them, because people get really picky and want to know what kind of worms they're getting. They don't want a mixture, they don't want to, I just can't get too concerned about it, but I only want to buy one kind of thing.
And you can make worm casting tea the same way you make compost, same exact compost.
Yep, it's compost tea. Doesn't really matter if the compost was made thermal, if it was made worm, if it was static. It's the organisms in there that are the important things. So is thermal compost better than worm compost? All depends on how it was made. What's the biology that you've got? Thermal compost can contain the same set of organisms as worm compost. And I just think it's a little bit easier to make a worm compost, and you're more likely to have a really good mix, because we tend to put more mixtures of different kinds of organic matter into our worm bins than we do in a thermal bin. So just, a few extra things. I've already talked about additional inocula. Quite often when we're doing a thermal compost, and we want to get done in 21 days. We're going to layer our starting materials together, but when we put the water into the system, we're going to water with compost tea that has really good sets of organisms already chewing, already waving, already going. And you watch your temperatures just take off. And so you will end up turning your pile typically on day 1. You will turn again on day 3. You will turn again on day 5. You'll turn on day 7, day 10. That'll be the last time you have to turn. And then it takes the next 11 days for your compost pile to cool off and come back down to ambient temperature. So you're done in 21 days. That's a lot of tending that you have to do on that worm. So you can put already awake and going organisms and speed up this whole composting process. Well, why not have them inoculate your wood chip pile? So they're already there. Turning if it gets too hot, if it gets too dry, if you start getting anaerobic smells, if you start getting the actinobacteria, it's time to turn. Are you watering with chlorinated water when you're watering your compost pile? Maybe not too bright. Although if you're watering and the water is going through the air, by the time you move about 1.5 feet, if you've got little drops of water, most of the chlorine is blown off. The problem becomes the chloramine. And so you might want to think about getting a hose-end attachment where you put the humic acid in that little container. So all of your water that you're spraying with is already being mixed with humic acid. So you're complexing the chloramine as that chloramine goes out the nozzle. No, we don't have to worry about that. Covers, you put covers on if it's raining, if it's real hot and too much evaporation. So covers, just make sure that you're getting airflow into your pile even though it's covered. When you're applying your compost, whatever way you want to spread it, have some fun. Manure spreaders, broadcast spreaders, snow blowers, blower trucks. I know people who take those whirly-bird things that they do their seeds. As long as you don't have big chunky stuff in your compost, that works pretty well. Question?
So the closed-ended attachment, is that one of those kind of easy to pick up at the garden store?
Yep. Yeah, it's El Chico stuff. Then it just has a little container that you put your humic acid in there. And you can watch and see as you're using up your humic acid, you can see when you need to add more. And I suspect that most of them have an adjustment, so you can put more humic acid or less humic acid, whatever you think. Where do you think you are on the water pipe from the water treatment plant? The closer you are to the water treatment plant, the higher the concentration of chloramine, the more humic acid you have to use. Okay. So we've been through this, the thermal composting process. I'm moving on. Here's the temperatures. We have to heat to at least 131 degrees Fahrenheit for a full 3 days. So if you're only getting up to 131 to 150, you cannot turn for 3 days. Now, if we're getting up higher than that, we're heating. So typically when we go back to the food microbiology system, work that's already done with food, 131 to about 150, you would want to wait 3 days before you turn. But if you're in that 150 to 160 range, 2 days before you can turn. If you're up around 160 or 165 up in there, I think it's getting a little dangerous to let it go to 170, but every once in a while it'll get away from you. You can turn once a day, in 1 day. So, I think the battery's wearing out. Tell me something. So, yeah, it's crumbling. So if you can get up to higher temperatures, you can turn sooner. Just remember that the regulations are that you have to get up 131 degrees Fahrenheit for a full 10 to 15 days, during which time you turn 5 times. Those are the regs. Somebody wants to tell you that the regs say you have to turn every 3 days. Has not read the regs. Put their own interpretation on that. So if we get the temperature up to 10, if we get above 131, we could turn after 24 hours. Yeah, but it's only 131. I really have to leave it there for 3 days. But if we get up to a 160, 165, we could turn the next day. And that's what we often do when we get put it with compost heat into our pile. We're already up here and we're at full temperature, so we can turn after 1 day. And then, you know, we are up between 150, 160 for the next 2 days, so we can turn again. And we can turn again just as long as we get 5 turns in that 15-day period. We're following regs. We talked about chunkiness. We'd like to have at least 5% of that initial starting material, at least 1 inch in diameter, not a lot more, because physical structure allows oxygen to move through the pile. 50% moisture in a thermal pile. If you want a bacterial compost, you would probably start with a little bit more green and wood. So that original recipe that I gave you is a little bit on the fungal side. Well, if you want to encourage your bacteria a little bit more, you can change the recipe a little bit. What do you need? Now this would be a commercial compost where you want to get real hot pretty fast. 6 to 8 weeks is what it would take to get this composted. Add compost tea at the very first, and you could get it down to 21 days. Up to how fast. Now, what if you want a little more fungal? Then we put in more fungal foods, a little less green food for your bacteria. But notice the high nitrogen stays the same because the high nitrogen is party food. That's what determines how fast, how much heat are we going to generate. So in this recipe, 6 to 8 weeks, unless you put compost tea in right at the beginning, and then you can probably get it down to 21 days. And that woody material should be gone if you have a fungi in the pile. So here's a class in Australia. We're pointing out a lot of the different kinds of woody, green materials. We kind of did this other day out in the paddock over there. So, you know, how much of which are you going to put in? And now there they are. They've layered it in the pile. So mix of organic matters because we have to have the diversity. So here's that little table. 21 days, hot compost, 6 to 8 weeks, 3 months. So for those of you who don't want to have to be out there turning so incessantly, what if you don't care about the regs? You're making this for yourself, but you don't want to have to work so hard. Well, then let's only put in 10% high nitrogen at the beginning. And then we're going to put in maybe 50-50 equal amounts of green and woody. That's more, a little more fungal. You put a little more fungal, a little more bacteria, a little more bacteria. And typically when we only put in 10% high nitrogen, we only turn twice. Typically it takes about a week for the compost temperature to come up to turnable temperature. This will turn in a week. So this pile that we've cut out here, if the temperature is still going up, it may well take till next Tuesday for the temperature to get high enough so we really have to turn it. So we'll turn it in, temperature will drop, maybe it will come back up to temperature so we have to turn it a second time, but then on down back to ambient conditions. As long as we turn it so that hot out inside gets moved to the outside and the cool outside gets moved to the inside, we're probably going to do a pretty good job in dealing with all of the problem organisms, maybe good enough for our backyard. Thermometer, important for measuring temperature. Here's a typical temperature curve for a commercial pile where we're doing 5% nitrogen, slightly on the fungal side. So we're starting out at ambient conditions. This is in Fahrenheit. So we, initially that's an ambient condition, so we go out and measure in about 6 hours. We're going to measure, and you can see our temperature is already rising. The next morning, our temperature is already up around 100 degrees. So the next day, it's about 125. So it took us about 2.5 days to get up high enough temperature that we need to turn it. So we turn it and we drop the temperature down. 6 hours later, the temperature is already coming back up. The next morning, we've got to turn it again. drop the temperature down. And so here we go, we've got to turn it again there, drop the temperature down. But notice that it's getting longer between turns. The organisms are using up the food. Partying time, that old smorgasbord table is getting a little depleted. So the party is starting to wind down. The temperature never actually gets up to terminal temperature again, and it pretty much drops like a rock. If you've gone anaerobic in any part of this composting process, what you'll find is that instead of this dropping coming down, this temperature just sits there and looks at you. You let me go anaerobic. You're gonna pay. Because I'm not going to drop temperature for 6 months, 9 months, a year. Okay, if that happens, why not take that compost pile and use it to heat your house? So in places like Ukraine, we were training people to heat their houses with the compost piles that had gone wrong. Because you can maintain high temperature, 145 degrees, for 6, 9, 10, 12 months. And usually by the time it gets to be 12 months, I give up on it, spread it out, and just let it dry down. And how long would that high temperature go on? It's amazing. No one really understands what it is in a pile that when anaerobic that allows that heat to stay up so high for so long. It makes no sense. Okay, all that means is that we as human beings are too stupid to figure it out. It's happening, you can measure it. We ought to use that because you shouldn't heat a lot of things with that high temperature.
It seems counterintuitive because from what I understand with pathogenic, that you grow more anaerobic or faster growth, you would think they'd burn themselves out quicker.
You'd think.
Faster.
But I don't think it is pathogens then that are growing because this is just hanging out at 145. It's not really, it isn't anaerobic anymore. But those anaerobic waste products just allow these critters to generate. So, here we have the heat machine, and somebody ought to do something with this. Well, it's going to take a lot to figure this one out. Did you have a question? Okay. As soon as we finish. Thanks.
Were you able to add the tea to this composting to shorten the cycle?
No, this was just regular. We put it together. We didn't put tea into this one.
Could you shorten the cycle if you were to use tea in the medium?
Yeah, you could shorten this all up and we could be done in 21 days.
Where would you see the effect of the tea in?
You would want to add the tea right here at the very beginning, first or second turn. And then this temperature would just go up faster and you'd start to have to turn the very next morning. Everything would be shorter. You basically would end up turning every morning for 5 days. And sometimes I've even seen it where, come the middle of the first afternoon, you gotta turn it.
So you just compress that by what's optimal that you can compress it if you were to do that.
That's right.
What is
And you
optimal?
just have to keep up on the temperature. You just have to have somebody, well, and why not get thermometers? They just go into the pile and stay in the pile. And so it just sends the information to your computer back in the office. And when it's time to turn, your program just goes, get the turner out here and turn it again. And you can automate this in some ways.
So down to 21 days.
Yeah, it's down to 21 days. Have done it. So, if you don't want to work so hard, I don't like turning compost 5 times. So just drop your compost, your high nitrogen. Don't put as much in. And so now the temperature kind of lollygags its way up to terminal temperature. You turn it once to drop it down. Maybe it'll come back to temperature again. Maybe it'll come back 3rd time. That's what your thermometer's for. You're just checking this. And then, it's going to take its time, kind of lollygagging its way down. This typically takes about 2 to 3 months for it to get back down to ambient temperature. But when we're talking about finished compost, it means when you turn that compost, no more heat is generated. No more party left. The organisms are still in there, still working, but they are not in party time mode. They're in regular, normal workday mode. And so you're not getting any temperature increase when you turn it. Finished means the balance of the bacteria and fungus where you want it to be. You turn it, you don't generate any rapid growth. Maturity, rapid microbial activities is what we're done with. Stability, two different things. Glad that when people in the composting world mix these two terms up. Maturity, the organisms are at kind of your standard activity level, isn't increasing. Stability means bacteria and fungi are balanced by protozoa and nematodes. The rate at which bacteria and fungi are being eaten by protozoa and nematodes is at a stable level. You're not having rapid bacterial growth and then your protozoa take off and then crash and boom and then it takes over again. So we have a pulse of nitrate and then nothing. Pulse, nothing. Pulse, nothing. What are we selecting for when we do pulse, nothing?
Bacteria.
Weeds. So we don't want weeds growing on our compost pile. So, good compost should have health. Look, should have good bacterial fungal, should have protozoa nematodes, it shouldn't be too active. If you take a good compost and you put it into a plastic bag, the bag should not fill up with gas and go boom. It doesn't blow up. So, nutrient retention, bacterial fungal, should be balanced by protozoa nematodes eating them, so they should stay at constant levels. People often ask, what about diversity in your compost pile? We will actually be able to detect more species of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes after that compost comes down and is mature. For the next 6 months, we're able to detect more species. But after about 6 months, that compost is really going to run out of foods for some species. They're going to go absolutely dormant. We don't do a very good job at detecting them. So at about 2 years after you finish making your compost, it's no better than topsoil. So when do you use your compost? As soon as it's finished. As soon as it's come back down to ambient, hidden out in your plants, so you're finished with the rapid fungal bacterial growth. Your bacteria and fungi are growing really, really fast. Faster than protozoa and nematodes can balance them. You're in nutrient uptake mode and you're taking nutrients away from your plants. And that can harm your plants. If we have adequate protozoa and nematodes, they'll balance that, and so here comes the nutrients back. You've got to have that balanced nutrient cycling, or you can do some real harm to your plants. So, I have some people who like to say, so Elaine, you're telling us that we should make our compost and hoard it, because it's really good stuff. No. Because, after not too long, you're gonna be losing some diversity. So make the compost, use it. Get it out there, get the benefit from it that you want. Dark brown color, not black, not tan. We should be able to take our humic acids and extract them. It should be a humic acid color, not muddy. What do I mean by muddy? Let me show you some pictures. You should be able to see fungal strands. You shouldn't see a lot of actinobacteria. A finished compost should have a good forest floor smell. No stinks. How many of you are under the impression that smell you get just before it rains, that breeze that comes where it's already raining over there and you can smell that smell? How many of you think that that's good soil smell? It's not. That's Rhiziofulvin. It's an actinobacteria smell. So sometimes just before it rains, and you get that earthy smell, that's actinobacteria. we want a good forest floor smell. What does the forest floor smell like? Take it out, smell it. If you don't get any good smells out of that, go to the grocery store, to the mushroom counter, and get a couple of individuals of each of the mushrooms in there. Take it home and smell that. That should be a good earthy forest floor smell. So let me give you a couple of examples. What we're doing here is putting a milk chocolate bar over here. And then this is a 70% cocoa bar. So we can compare the color of our compost. Now, this part of the compost actually has a pretty good color. But look at all the junk in there that's not decomposed. They've got eggshells, they've got this, a piece of twine. Somebody, when they were finishing up the pile, they were getting neat. And so they were taking all the extra garbage and throwing that into the pile. Oops. Because this is no longer something that you could call completely compost. There could be all kinds of pathogens, all kinds of bad stuff all over this material. If they had just left that stuff out, we probably would have had a pretty good compost. They might have won this contest. But they got a lot of points taken off because of the garbage in their compost. Now, if you take this compost and put it in a sieve and passively run water through it, this is what you get, what they got out in this particular compost. Look at the fact that there is no brown color to this water. So, in fact, that compost is not really composted at all. We don't have any humic acid in it. So, while it might have looked pretty, it definitely was not compost. Now, how about this? Look at that color as compared to our 70% cocoa. This is a lot different, isn't it? So, it's got some nice aggregate structure to it. It seems to be a little bit too dark, maybe went just a little bit anaerobic. Now let's look at what was coming out. See how it's not a nice, clean color brown? It's muddy. So it's got some humics, but it's not nice and clear. It's got some muddy quality to it. Pretty good compost. Nice brown color. Look at the comparison with our chocolate bar. Got a little bit of undecomposed material, but that's okay. It'll be decomposed. It's got good structure, nice airways and passageways in it. Now let's look at that and see how there's not a lot of mud involved in this one. It's not grungy looking. We got a good humic acid coming out of this compost. So of the things we've looked at so far, this is the winner. So, how do you think about this one? That's flat. It's very anaerobic, and look at the humic acid. Not. A little bit of fulvic coming out of it, not impressive. So these are some pretty good tests when you're trying to look at something and you don't have your microscope on. The pathogens should not be present in a compost system hot, or they've gone through the earthworm's digestive system. And so at Foodweb, we've looked at thousands of composts at this point, and we never find any human pathogens in a properly made compost. They do not exist. So when you get somebody who says, you can't make compost without there being some E. coli left in it, they just don't know. They don't understand about the composting operation.
What is CFP?
Pardon?
CFP.
Colony forming units. Thank you for catching that. Remember when we were talking about Petri dishes? And when we put our sample on that surface of the medium on our Petri dish, we don't know for absolute sure that we're only getting one bacterium that then grows and makes this colony on our Petri dish. We don't know for absolute sure. So, some 20 years ago, somebody went all ballistic about this. You can't possibly say that that came from one bacterium. So we hedged our bets And what we say is, that's a colony forming unit. Probably one bacteria, but it might have been two, might have been three. It started that colony, so that's where that term came from. It's just to be bureaucratic about what we're talking about.
Do you smell the bacteria in the air right now? Like, or I just had a little
Could be, I can't smell anything. So, I think people here have already asked this question. Doesn't the high heat kill the good guys? No, good guys luckily have dormant stages. A lot of them really do tolerate quite well high temperatures, so there is a factor of speed. If you have your compost and in 20 minutes you go from ambient to 150 degrees, you can kill things at that point. Because if the temperature changes too fast, they don't have time to go, wait, hold on, it's getting hot. I need to go put up my hammock. And you'd be dead before they can really do anything about it. So rapid change is a problem. Slower change, that's slow enough change. So there's the temps when we're looking at the higher temperatures. I love it when somebody says, because your compost got up to 170 degrees, it's sterilized the pile. What? If my compost pile is unsterile at 170, how can it stay at that temperature? What's generating heat if the pile's sterile? So you just whack them upside the head. Because for you to remain generating heat, you have to have the growth of microorganisms or you can't maintain the heat. So it's always kind of fun. What? So, yeah, well, David hasn't stopped me yet. But I'm almost done. We went out and we grabbed 12 different composts. And we measured percent organic matter in these 12 commercially available composts. And I love the fact, like, compost number 8 was a whopping 10% organic matter. How much organic matter should be present in your compost? 100%. 100%. What else could be in your compost pile?
Rocks.
So, I don't think this was actually compost. It was kind of eye-opening looking at commercially available compost. The best one was only 60% organic matter. So the stuff that was available on the market was pure
Garbage.
Yeah, garbage. I was going to be nastier. I was going to say crap. Household composting, just to real quick go through this. In a household composting process, we want to make it kind of a balance between static compost and a regular composting pile. So let's say we have our bin, and you can do just a pile like here, or sometimes I like to make it one of the wire frame ones. With a wire frame, I would probably only put 50-50 green and woody down at the bottom, and I'd probably fill this at least 3 feet up, because now I'm going to go and put my household waste material at least 2 feet in from any edge. 1 foot down into the pile, make sure that it's good and covered. And deposit it there, make sure it gets good and covered up. I typically will put actually a little flag in there so I know that I've already occupied this deposit site. And then I'm gonna go put my next deposit, a couple days later, whenever I accumulate enough in my house that I need to get rid of it. And then the next one, and then the next one, and the next, 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 and the next. Depends on what size your family is, how many deposit sites you get. Okay, so now that's all. Let's put in the middle. Let's put a couple of deposits there in the middle. So you can see I've got like a month worth of garbage that just went into this pile. And now I'm going to put in another layer. So let me put in like another 1.5 feet, 2 feet. As long as I'm 2 feet in from the edge, any edge, I can now put in a whole bunch more deposits. I'll take the flags here and put them there. And then I may fill up the compost pile all the way to the top, and then again, deposits all the way around the side, down the middle. So I've got 2-3 months where I've been depositing my waste material into the compost pile. Pull out all the flags. I'm not going to be putting any more waste material into this pile. I'm going to wait a couple of days after I put my last deposit in here. And now I'm going to go get my high nitrogen material. I layer my high nitrogen material onto the top of the pile, pull the wire off, set the wire up next to this, and now I'm going to turn my pile, watering if I need to water it. You know, some of the deposits could be a little yucky. Let's make sure that gets into the middle of the pile. And so now I start the normal composting process. Now with my food waste, I'm going to follow that composting operation. Well, there's only 10% high nitrogen typically. Let me get up to temperature. When it's hot enough, I turn it, let it cool off. Now I'm probably starting another pile while this is going through that operation. So I have a second pile. I'm depositing my household waste. Why do you go make sure that you're at least 2 feet in from the edge of your compost pile? Because you don't want the neighbor's dogs and cats. You don't want the mongoose to find, what is it that attracts any of these vermin? Yes, your neighbor's dog is a vermin. You don't want them to smell it because the anaerobic smells is what attracts them to that food. So you want to make sure that it's completely covered up so they don't smell it, they don't know it's there, they don't spread your garbage all over the neighborhood. Well, and sometimes it's really useful that it's inside a wire mesh. So that's a really easy way to do that backyard composting, where you're dealing with your you're dealing with your household garbage. Real easy way to deal with that and not end up with a problem. Okay? What else do we want to talk about? Standard compost. I think that's kind of gone over that already. Food compost, I think we've gone through that.
The application of the compost, as far as not overwasting it, if you have ground that you can't till into the surface of life, at what point are you wasting your product?
What you really want to look at is what's the biology in your soil, and make sure that the biology in the compost is going to fix that problem. And typically then all we're applying is 1 ton of compost per acre. It's a bare dusting. Because the point of compost is really not to put on an organic layer. Get mulch. Mulch is way cheaper, you haven't had to process it as much. So let's say you want a massive amount more organic there. Go buy some cheap mulch, put that down. And then put compost in with it, or put 1 ton of compost down first and cover it with your mulch layer, protect it from drying out. Or put down the compost tea or compost extract in the mulch, and then put that out.
So when you say, if you already had you got 3 options. You got the compost, you use it as it's made, or you can make a tea.
Or an extract.
Or an extract would be soil drenching, or foliar feeding with the teas.
I would typically only make a tea to layer apply.
You're not soil drenching the teas.
Yeah, I'm going to use an extract because they're way easier to make, way faster.
So the simple dusting, once the compost is optimum, really the layer is just dusting.
Yep, just to put an inoculum on top of your soil, and then if you're in a real dry or sunny spot, make sure that you protect that compost layer, your organisms, by putting a mulch layer on top of that. And if you wanted to, you could come along with an extra. Just to, well, and why not check and make sure 2 weeks later, take a sample of the soil and make sure that the biology that you've added is starting to do something beneficial. If it's not, then an extract goes out there, and you can use it to do shift the biology. So worm bins, this is harvest from the bottom of the worm bin. So the knife is just put over the top. Look at all the fungal material, all those fungal strands holding things together. So they've been putting a lot of wood chips, sawdust, paper, cardboard, things like that into their compost to make sure that they've got a good fungal compost going out. They sweep that up off the floor, put it into these containers, let it dry down to about 50% moisture and start selling it. This is a really large worm composting operation that we work with in South Africa and South Australia. They get all the paper products from the whole area between Melbourne and Adelaide in Australia, Victoria and South Australia. All of that comes to their facility. They pick through it to remove the garbage, and that's the biggest problem with anything human beings have anything to do with. We have to have a crew that picks their garbage up. The day that 2 hand grenades arrived on the conveyor belt of that coming in, shut down the whole operation for the rest of the day. Because you got to get a bomb squad to come out. You got to get people all dressed up because what if those grenades go off? So yeah, thank you, whoever did that. So we take this fiber material, mix it with water, so we get a nice big slurpy mess. And then we basically put it into the spin cycle on the washing machine, big size. So this paper slurry that's got most of the water out of it gets laid down on top of this. Worms come on up and eat all the organisms, and so this is what that surface looks like after the worms have completely consumed and mixed in, leveled off all of that material. The paper material blocks on there like gray paste. And worms pull that, mix it in within a 3-day period of time, so we never have any fruit fly or fungus gnat problems. Look at the fungal component in there.
And they eat magazines too?
Yep, it doesn't bother them. You just have to make sure that you don't have more than about 5% of your paper supply with the slick paper material. That stuff is kind of hard on their digestive systems if it's the only thing they're eating. So make sure you get it mixed in with lots of other stuff. Nappies and diapers to make part of the diapers with a little human excrement on it. There's a lot of that.
Is that plastic that they put on the paper?
You have to pull the plastic off. So you can't be putting plastic through there. Okay? So that's why we've got to pick through stuff. Yes, everybody wears the gloves to be pulling stuff apart.
Are they drying that out just to sell it? So that if you were doing it at home, you don't need to dry it out?
You would probably, if you were doing that paper slurry, yeah, you have to dry it off. Because you don't want to put it on it 100% moisture.
Are you talking about the finished product?
Yeah.
You're talking about the finished product.
Yeah. Finished products should, I mean, it depends on your market, but somewhere between 30 and 50% moisture. If you're shipping compost a long way, people don't want to pay for water.
Right, I don't want to ship it, I just want to use it, so.
If you want to
just
use
take
it,
out gunky and use it with water and mix it around.
well,
I think I like to do it.
if you want to make an extract out of it, yeah. Or if you like to apply it, you just want to kind of mix it up and pour it out like a slurry, yeah, sure, no problem.
It has, if you're in your composting, can you put part of the paper in your compost piles and decompose it as well?
Yep. Yeah, paper, cardboard, no problem. Fungi love the stuff. It's a fungal food. Worms adore cardboard. They're some of their favorite food. The fungi that grow on the glue in between the layers of cardboard, the worms get in there and they just go crazy. So if you lift up the edge of your cardboard, and here's your worms, just having an orgy in under there. They love. Have you ever put down like half of a watermelon or a melon rind or something? Put it down flesh side. Come along after another day. Orgy is going on in there. I just love that stuff. Lots of babies coming our way. Just a note on the taking your worm compost, a solid material, and just mix it in the water. Keep careful because it's gonna plug your sprayer up.
Yeah, I just spread, I just pour it.
Yeah, so take your sprinkler can. You're still probably gonna plug your sprinkler can up, but that's easy enough to wash out. So that's why we don't typically just take compost and mix it with water and apply it. It clogs everything up. So it's compost fertilizer. Now, you gotta be careful on the legal definition of fertilizer. But you've got these graphs in your information. So when we're looking at a gram of compost, look at the nitrogen in there. As compared to any soil. We've got less, we've got 10,000 times pretty much the amount of nitrogen in your compost is compared to any soil. So a ton of compost going on. So this is your total nitrogen. It's tied up in your bacterial digesters, nematodes, organic matter, all of that. This is your soluble ammonium. They need ammonium here, not ammonia. We're going to talk about this the other day. And then nitrate. So your soluble components. Take a look at, what is this, calcium, phosphorus. Think you're replenishing your phosphorus supply in your soil when you put compost. Potassium. Pretty sure that you could say that this compost was made from manure. Manure quite often has these outrageously high levels of soluble potassium levels. So I tend not to like to use compost made from manure all the time.
The labeling that you typically see on the back of fertilizer, right, in the banner.
Soluble nitrogen, soluble, it's NPK.
So what is that conversion? I mean, is that parts per million, or what does that represent?
It's, it's usually parts per million, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, and that's what this is, parts per million. So, like this is magnesium, let's go back to
So when you say what would 1 pound of that yield or represent, that, and how would you convert that? Those layman's way of thinking.
Well, so NPK levels is, it's, you have to convert it to percentage. I'm not going to do that really quickly in my brain. So you would probably be looking at 1% potassium. Yeah, 1% potassium. This would be a 1 on your NPK. This would be a 1. So to convert these parts per million to percentage, you would decimal 4 places. And that gives you percentage.
I'll quarter you later.
Okay. I will probably send you to Graham Lancaster for that.
Send in the right place.
Okay. Is there any word on lunch back there? We keep going. So lunch.
I saw that.
Okay. So when you add compost to soil, what happens? So here's an example. This is what's in our agricultural field to begin with. We have 1 million bacteria per gram, 5,000 species. 500 grams of fungi, 500 species. Then we have no flagellates, no ciliates, and yes, it's an anaerobic signal with all the ciliates we've got. Typical ag soil. Intro. So we're going to put 1 ton of compost, and here's the biology in the compost. We have 600 million bacteria per gram. We've got 25,000 species, and 150 micrograms of fruitful biomass, 8,000 species, and we've got 12,000 flagellates, 31,000 amoebae, 29 ciliates. So very good, very aerobic material. Great addition to our soils, and they've got exactly things that it needs to get. 2 weeks later, we're looking at 170 million bacteria. So some of those bacteria would make it. So we've diluted our sample just a little bit here. All the species that we put into the soil, they're still there. So We're protecting our leaves, we're protecting our roots. We got the full contingent of bacteria. We're looking at how much did our fungi grow. So there was some really good fungal foods in there. We're in our compost. Let's look at how much our fungi grew. Great. And all of the species in our compost have got it added, and they're growing, they're doing their thing. A little bit of dilution of our flagellates, meaty. But look at the fact that we've dealt with the anaerobic conditions in that soil, we have plant structure. So 2 weeks. And typically we're seeing this kind of conversion and we're getting all the benefits from adding that compost in.
So are you saying that if you drop the ciliates, you build structure?
We want to get rid of that anaerobic habitat because if the ciliates go away, they're only going to go away if they can't be growing anymore. If the structure wasn't built, the ciliates would still be winning. So we very rapidly can turn this around.
So long as that neighbor like threw it around it now, spread the ground, what happened?
If there's any drift into our yard, you're going to be harming the organisms in our yard.
So all the fungi did.
You probably harm them. What Roundup really does, Roundup when it gets added into the soil immediately sequesters most of your micronutrients. Grows a boatload of bacteria. So these bacteria would take off, and because the bacteria now getting most of your food resources, this would drop. And so we would lose structure, we would probably lose a lot of our protozoa, our ciliates would come back at us. Because we're going to lose structure, oxygen's not going to be moving into our soil, a lot of bad things because of the application of Roundup. So I would like to get my lawyer and have him hand you a lawsuit for destroying all of my livestock.
Well, I did say-
And I think we need to start thinking of some of those things. Somebody applies a chemical and it drifts onto my yard, and I can show that before they applied that, I have this biology. After they let that drift, my biology has been harmed. They have to pay for it to be fixed. Let's start adding in lawsuits. Okay, we've got to establish a little bit of precedence on that.
Yeah, but the problem is farmers suing farmers and we're not going after the chemical guys, which is really.
But how do we stop bad neighbor from thinking that there is no problem with that toxic chemical? It is a grassroots thing. They've got to stop the people who are buying the garbage. So, is lunch ready?
Break.
Roundup.
We'll take this coming inside here. I'm gonna have our culinary artist gonna be there at 12:30. So if you have your refrigerator, if you guys got your refrigerator stuff, please take it out because they're gonna be doing some cupcakes. So not for us, but for a wedding that they got contract.
I'm starving.